We hit Illinois. We were going to touch back on that Ohio buck though, because you said it was seeking a little bit more like Jared's buck was, and this was on the 23rd of October.
Yeah. So that deer, basically, that I called him Roman because he was such a weird looking deer. He had big giant twos and he had giant threes, small twos, and small brows, but he kind of looked like a Roman's helmet. But anyways, he was kind of the same way in a sense of like at first, but he showed up to the farm a little later in Ohio, this place that I can hunt on, and he was kind of a deer that he'd been around there for a couple of years, and I always thought he was one of those bucks that just needed gut shot because like I just never thought he was going to be anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And all of a sudden this year he shows up on the camera and I'm like, what in the hell? You know, he really blew up. I couldn't get over it. And so long story short, I was like, well, I'm going to try to hunt that deer, you know? And he was kind of in and out for about 2 weeks, you know, like he would be around, then he'd leave, then he'd be back, then he'd leave. Well, here, all he was doing, I think, was staying in the timber eating acorns, you know? So he became a fun deer once I finally decided I was going to hunt him. And, you know, he started showing me a little bit of the signs of what we talk about a deer kind of showing their territory or, you know, dominance. And I could tell he was slowly becoming a deer that was, because there was two other big mature deer on the farm, not high scoring deer, but old mature deer that have always been dominant bucks too. But I could slowly see that he was kind of becoming a chess player in this match of, you know, on the farm. So I definitely, you know, I had two different plots, you know, basically the whole farm is seeded down in hay.
Yep.
And so like my food plots really don't do much when you've got alfalfa and clover growing in the whole fields on the whole farm.
Yep.
So basically, you know, I had just had a little sweeter clover, I think it was, that I had planted, and it was that foundation clover by Big Time. And I really like it. And then they also have a Clover Select, which has chicory in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had those in two different spots of the farm. And basically what that deer was doing, he was bedded in between in this huge timber hollow. And when I would get his picture, I would always get him on those scrapes on those plots. Like, you know, I had him on scrapes. I didn't have him on the plots, like to get him eating. I had him on the scrapes and he'd work those scrapes. And I mean, he'd work them hard. And so I could tell he was definitely becoming a player in the game. But he was like, just very active. Like he would show up 2-3 times a night and work that scrape, you know? And so basically what that was telling me he was doing is he'd go out in that field, lay down for a while, maybe push some does around, come back, work the scrape, maybe go off in the timber, eat some acorns, come back out to that plot, look around a little bit, hit the scrape, go back to bed. Sometimes he'd go to the other plot. It was just kind of a same thing, but he was becoming more seeking oriented faster than like the Illinois deer. Like, I don't know, the timing was just different. It seemed like in the two states this year. But, you know, on October 21st, because I had a stand in the timber, I figured out where he was finally bedding. And I put a stand in the timber and I was like, I just got to find this deer. And because I could never exactly pinpoint where he was. Well, then I seen him at about 150 yards away one night with binoculars. I watched him come out of this one hollow where I thought he might be. So then I moved to stand the next day. I snuck into that stand. And as I was climbing into the stand at 2:30 in the afternoon, I got off work, got in there, and I'd raked a trail all the way into the stand the day before when I got out. I just kicked the leaves off the whole way out. I just made the noise and did it. And I snuck in there the next day. And as I was climbing the stand, got into the stand, and I looked to my left, there's a doe at 40 yards. And I'm like, okay, darn it. So she's just kind of standing there. She didn't know anything was going on. So I'm like, how am I going to get my camera arm out and all this stuff set up? I was by myself. And all of a sudden I heard, brr, and I looked to the right of her. Here, he'd stood up out of a treetop. He was with her, just already with her. Wow. And 40 yards, and I got this big giant deer standing there. So I kind of freaked out, got my bow up the tree real fast. I had a GoPro camera mount. for my head. So I just put that on, couldn't get my camera out of the bag or on my arm. So I'm like, I don't really want to miss the opportunity of this deer. So maybe I can try to film it all with the GoPro head mount. He pushed her downhill a little bit, got off of her. But she was still too close that I couldn't do much. He was down the hill going to walk off. So I took the black rack real fast and rattled, and he come right back. And he was coming up and around, and he came in fast. And I'm trying to adjust my hat and all this to try to make sure I get it. He came into like 25 yards. I thought it was 30, 33 yards. I somehow misjudged it, everything going fast, and I shot right over his back. I mean, when I shot, though, he exploded and dropped. But still, I zinged it right over his back, never touched him.
Jeez.
So I was like, gun, you know. But I ended up killing him 2 days later, out of a ghillie blind where he came into that other plot that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't go to that other plot till like dark. But the night before, the day after I missed him, he showed up into that plot in the back, just running does like crazy.
Wow.
And so I was like, the next day I was just torn. Do I hunt this timber close to his bedding, or do I go to that ghillie blind? And I'm like, well, he showed up there in daylight. It's an easier spot the way the wind was. So I did go to the ghillie, and I ended up killing him. But the funny thing was, he actually showed up in front of my stand in the timber first, before he came to
worked his way right through.
Yeah, so either spot I could have killed him. It was pretty cool.
It's so crazy when you talk about a deer like that just seems, even though he's very concentrated in an area, it just seems so mobile versus some of these other deer that it's like when you do see him, you better be in the right place or he's gone again. Like you don't see him often.
So this deer, he was staying in I would say it was about a 50-acre spot, but he was running that 50 acres those 4 days like he was full rut.
Yep.
But then when he come into that field that night, he just came through the plot slowly eating and kind of sniffing around, looking at those. And then he started pushing one because he squeezed right past me. I was trying to get a shot. I was trying to get the camera on him, and he squeezed by me. So I just calmed down. I had to draw on this deer twice, but I calmed down. He went out to like 70 yards, and I was like, he'll come back. He's going to push these does around again. And sure enough, he came back. He ended up pushing the doe 10 yards from my blind. Then he went out to about 21 yards and stood broadside, and I still shot him back a little bit. The deer for some reason, that deer had some kind of mojo on me.
That's crazy, man. It's funny that you said you got him by that stand again, because again, I think a lot of us as like hunter intuition, especially around a mature buck, is like you make a mistake on a deer like that, the odds of him, especially soon after, coming back that same spot, you would think are not good.
Yeah, a lot of times they don't even know what it is.
I was going to say, what was his reaction? Did you think?
Yeah, I mean, freaking blew out of there like crazy, but he never blew. He didn't know what happened.
Yeah, just something.
He just heard the arrow zing over. He heard the bow go off and the arrow zing over his back.
Yep.
He didn't. But granted, I'm to a stop.
Yeah.
So they hear that and they look. So they don't really know.
Sure.
It's one thing if they get your wind.
Yeah.
But he didn't get my wind, so that's a different story. But also, again, the girls overpower everything. So
Sure.
The spot that stand was in the timber, where there was a couple treetops on this open ridge, and all these does like to bed around. And I watched this group of does all the time come in here and lay by that. Well, that's just, it's those little things like that can give you an advantage, of picking out, it's of how to narrow down a stand location in a 300-acre block of timber.
Yeah. And I think that's important because, a lot of people, especially in that late October, November timeframe, are trying to focus in on that buck so much. Where's he bedded? Where's he at? Where's he doing this? And really, if they just would look at where the does are, they'd be setting themselves up for success.
Yeah, that or their scrapes, because a scrape in the timber like that, dude, I'm telling you, there's no better time to kill the big deer than that last week and a half, 2 weeks of October. People talk about the October law. It does exist. Deer get a little more stagnant, but if you're in them and on them, they'll move. They got to move. They move every day.
Yeah.
They're going to do the same things. But like those scrapes in the timber are magical. you know, or on the edges of food plots, right in those corners, you know, on the right times. They can just be really, you know, that's why I'm such a believer in the black widow deer lures. You know, you guys see me preach because the stuff freaking works.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets amped up on those mock scrapes. You know, sometimes it might take them a couple days, 4 or 5 days, and then all of a sudden they take it over.
Yep.
And then they just it all the time.
I'm curious, Ben, how you tackle those last 2 weeks of October when specifically this year, I saw a lot of deer that, you know, we didn't see them until October 25th. You know, the property just didn't seem to hold anything until, you know, that very last part. All of a sudden, there they are. Maybe not necessarily.
And that could be too, Jared. That could be crops coming off. That could be so. Like if they're not there, they're not there.
Yep.
It's, you know what I mean. So like if you just have to deal with it as the time comes. So like as the deer present the opportunity. So like this deer, he was pretty frequent from October 10th on. He was around the farm, so I had the opportunity to get on him. If they're not there and you're not getting their pictures or you're not seeing them, you know, glassing, it's hard to hunt them, you know? So like, I don't even put the effort in until I have a target.
Take me